Alright guys, what is up? Derek Spalding here, and today I'll be talking about all the wrong things with the song Pledge of Allegiance. Now, if you don't know, Pledge of Allegiance is a American staple for both representing national pride and the song that children have to sing every morning in school days. However, should we ring the song with such national pride? In this video, I discuss why we should not by putting out every problem with it, and I go into great details about each one. Now, if you want more info on this, you can check out any or all of the links that I will post down in the description below. So, let's begin. And now, before I go, you don't have to comment on the fact that I'm looking down a lot because a lot of this information I didn't know before. I did a lot of research, and I will be looking down at stuff I wrote down. It's not a script, it's just notes, but, I mean, it is what I've written down, so I can remember everything. Just saw the book right there. Here it is, and starts right on this page. So let's begin. Originally stated, I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's right, that is what the original Pledge of Allegiance, written in 1892 by Socialist Minister Francis Bellamy, said. Now you gotta remember, this was written well over 100 years ago, and therefore some alterations have been made. In 1923, the pledge was slightly altered, and the words of the United States of America were added. Now let me let you know a little secret. The original Pledge of Allegiance was not just written for the United States. As much as you like to think of it as just an American thing, it was actually written for all countries to use, which is why it did not include the words in the United States of America before. The new pledge stated, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now in 1954, due to communist threats, President Eisenhower encouraged Congress to add the phrase, under God, to the pledge. Bellamy's own daughter actually objected to this alteration, but they still went through with it anyway. The pledge now states, and has from 1954 to today, stated, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, let me just go to the first problem here. The fact that the Pledge of Allegiance says under God in it. Now, this is a huge problem for me because I am atheist. Now, probably something you didn't know, but yeah, I do not believe in any religion, and I also believe in religious freedom. Now, what this violates is the separation of church and state. In fact, the Constitution states itself, Congress shall, excuse me, let me restart. This is exact wording. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This means, if you didn't figure it out, that Congress cannot pass any laws for or against religion. Now, but in 1954, Congress added under God to the pledge. Now this to me seems like an intermingling of church and state. Church being God, and the state being the Pledge of Allegiance itself. That's an official national thing, and this country celebrates religious freedom. Now, this means that they basically broke the Constitution and the law states separation of church and state. This not only forces people who are atheists such as myself, who wants to be part of this country, to deal with this, but anyone who's any other religion should rightly be offended by this. This also makes children by the millions forced to say God's name every day in school, no matter what they personally believe in. Is this fair? I certainly don't think so. Of course, we could always let Christianity rule our government. I mean, after all, that's what they did in the Middle Ages, right? And we all know that there is a reason why the Middle Ages are called the Dark Ages, with horrible things such as the Inquisition, which basically meant if you went against the church, you were killed. You know, how can we let Christianity seep into our government? That's going to unpurify it, as there's radical people with every religion, and religion should be free. We have freedom of speech, which is why people who have very bad ideas or ideas that go against the government, such as myself, can say what they believe in. Now, this is not the only problem. This is definitely a major one, and is a change that could have been avoided, but it's not the first, or it's not the worst, or the first, really. The other two problems I'll be discussing are original to the Pledge of Allegiance, which is why I put this as only number 3. Number 2 here is right after we say under God now, we call this nation indivisible. But wait, what about the Civil War? Did anyone remember that? I'm sure none of you experienced it, but if anyone knows anything about American history, which I assume most people do, they know that the Civil War was a war that occurred within America itself, occurring from 1861 to 1865. This war goes exactly against what the Pledge of Allegiance states. Now, of course, you could always say that by saying indivisible, Francis was trying to say that the nation could not be divided as the North did win the Civil War and therefore reunited. However, they were divided because 7 Confederate states actually separated from the Union and formed what they called the Confederacy. This grew to 11 states soon after, and they even went as far as to have their own currency. The South also wanted the right to be able to divide from this country anytime they wanted, therefore meaning that they basically were anticipating another civil war happening. This means that not only is our nation indivisible, but can be divided by very simple issues that should be able to be discussed. This also means that millions can be killed for a very bad reason. Let me just leave it at that. Now, moving right along, I will discuss the third and biggest problem of all. Really, you could call it a lie because that's basically what it is. Now, after calling us, let me do this for you, indivisible, the pledge states that we have liberty and justice for all. Well, let me show you just how unjust our country really is. First of all, according to a new survey of 188 judges, prosecuting attorneys, public defenders, sheriffs, and police in Ohio, and a survey of 41 state attorneys, about 10,000 people a year in the United States alone are wrongly convicted of serious crimes, going everywhere from, murder to aggravated assault to forcible rape. This would mean that 0.5% of all people convicted for serious crimes are innocent. Now, the exact number is estimated to be 9,969 people. Need I remind you that these are just for serious crimes, as I said before. Some of these crimes can result in the innocent receiving a life sentence in jail. So just picture this. You've done nothing wrong, but an eyewitness says you did. You go to court, and the jury thinks the eyewitness is right, even though people's eyes do make mistakes, and you're sent to jail for life, and you never get out, and you never did anything. And let's say you're convicted of the crime of murdering an 8-year-old girl. You go to jail for life. If they don't sentence you to death, if you do get to live, you go to jail for life, and what happens? Oh, right. You get either sodomized in prison, beaten by security guards in prison, which is another unjust thing, by the way, or you get killed by the prisoners themselves. But you've done nothing wrong. So, how exactly is this fair to you? And how exactly is this justice and liberty? Now, these staggering results come to us from C. Ronald Huff, a well-respected man and director of the Criminal Justice Research Center. He is also a co-writer of the book Convicted but Innocent, Wrongful Conviction and Public Policy. Huff also stated that many more wrongful convictions may occur due to his numbers being very conservative. People estimate as many as 20,000 people are wrongfully convicted of serious crimes each year in the United States. Is this liberty and justice for all? I don't think so. But this is not even the only injustice that occurs in our country. These are mistakes. I could understand if this was the only one. It's still injustice. One person being wrongfully convicted is injustice. But I could understand it at least then, because they tried to have liberty and justice. Oh, but no, the problem goes much deeper than that. Let's talk about the actual corruption of this country. Now I will not include slavery, as this was abolished nearly 30 years before the original pledge was written, and maybe he was trying to make a statement about racism or whatever. But corruption against colored people, women, gay people, and the handicapped was accepted all the way into the 1950s and 60s. In fact, it was stated as law sometimes. You've got to remember, the 1950s was not that long ago, and you probably know somebody or yourself that was alive during this time period, at least born then. In these times, our country had awful segregation. Colored people could not use the same bathroom as whites, go to the same school as whites, or even be associating themselves with whites. Even today, many police officers are racist and even violent towards colored people, especially African Americans. And it's not just police, but regular people themselves doing violence crimes against black people, or eyewitnesses accusing them just because they're black. Now, women suffer the same problem. Up until the 1950s, they're expected not to have jobs, and women working was not even socially acceptable until the 1970s and 80s. This injustice occurs even today, as law allows employers to actually pay women less than men for the same exact job, doing the same exact labor. Now, of course, we got handicapped people. Now, this usually refers to people with birth defects or an inherited/developmented disease. Not a developmental disease, because that would just cause your development and therefore would be usually inherited, like autism or Down syndrome. I'm talking about diseases that developed over time, such as cancer or arthritis. Now, this does not really usually affect people who have fought in wars or got injured in some other manly way, as people like to think of it. Now, let me give you one example here. One horrible example of this was a teacher who I'll leave nameless that got annoyed with an autistic student. Now, let me remind you, she was a special ed teacher. As a proper punishment, she locked the young child into a suitcase and left him in the hallway. Now, it was not until his mother heard his muffled cries and found him that he was freed. Can you even imagine this? Someone coming to school thinking that your child's safe with these teachers, around other students who suffer from similar issues, and then you find your student locked in a suitcase. What would you do? It's a question that you really have to ask yourself. Of course, you weren't in the situation, neither was I, so I really can't tell you, but I can assure you the mother was very upset, as I would be if that had happened to a child that I had, or not even a child necessarily, but just anybody close to me. Now, of course, we have an even worse corruption: police corruption. Now, exact estimates do not exist, as many of these cases are currently unknown and probably will remain this way forever. However, the most common form of police corruption is to accept bribes or to commit extortion. Accepting bribes is when a police officer allows a crime to go unnoticed by getting paid by an organized crime group or maybe even an individual. This usually is either for gang-related murders, assaults, rapes, kidnappings, or drug trafficking and possession. Extortion police is when a police officer actually goes out of his way to find the person who committed the crime, and then instead of arresting them, he tells them that if they pay him X amount of money, he won't have to go to jail. Now, let me ask you the question: should this be acceptable? I think not. Now, this can also happen with judges and jury members who do the same thing in taking bribes to not arrest somebody because they have all the power with that. Now, we may talk about just a few more police crimes here. Another corruption is when police rob from a crime scene. This can include, but is not limited to, stealing drugs from a crime scene for personal use or selling, stealing cash from a crime scene, stealing property such as a car from a crime scene, performing a shakedown in order to find property to steal, or stealing evidence or equipment from the police department. Now, often police will steal evidence in order to help with a crime going unnoticed. Another crime is when police try to help each other by committing perjury, when they basically lie and say when police didn't, like if a police officer didn't have to shoot somebody, and then they say they did in self-defense to protect each other. Now, I mean, think about this. Police ride in vehicles every day and they say to serve and protect, but is that what they were doing? Not always. And let me promise you, the Pledge of Allegiance is a little more corrupted than anyone ever thought. Now, of course, these problems can be fixed, and, we could have a fair Pledge of Allegiance, but as of now we don't, and I really don't think we ever will, because corruption will always exist, and the government will always try to pretend like it doesn't. Whether they use national symbols, or, anything they can. But let's just say I hope our government doesn't go down the path as some of the other ones are, and I hope that this country continues to be at least somewhat okay. But yes, that was everything wrong with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I hope you enjoyed. This is the first in the series of Everything Wrong With. I will be uploading more of these, and I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like the video if you did, and subscribe and comment talking to me. We can talk about any issues you had with it also. And also, please share the video, because really it's good to try to get the message out there of what our country, the United States, has become. If you don't live in the United States, then you can laugh at us for having such problems. Now, I hope you enjoyed. Peace, love, and much respect. And don't forget, links are in the description for all information.